I've now been able to accumulate a $3 million net worth. My business is currently worth about $7 million. We do about $400,000 a month in turnover. We actively acquire businesses. We live on a 70-acre property that we've turned into an animal sanctuary. I film crazy content every day of chasing snakes and rescuing animals, basically showing people how to live for today and plan for tomorrow.
This is the Content Capitalists Podcast. We talk to business owners who've used video to grow their businesses to $1 million a year or more. How they did it, what worked, what didn't. Welcome to the Content Capitalists with your host, Ken Okazaki.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Content Capitalist Podcast, where we have conversations with business owners who are doing at least $1 million a year in revenue, many times a lot more. And we talk about two things. Number one, their business, and number two, how are they using content in their business and how it's helping them. Today I've got with me someone named Jackson Millan. Now, the reason I'm inviting him here is because he's a contradiction. He's a juxtaposition. He is the one and only Jackson Millan. He does not follow a mold. He doesn't try to copy somebody else. He doesn't try to be Grant Cardone. He doesn't try to be Gary Vee. He doesn't try to be Alex Hormozi. He is the one and only Jackson Millan, and you'll see what I mean in just a minute. Jackson, welcome to the show.
Ken, great to be here, mate. Really excited for our chat today and share hopefully some different ways to go about business and content and making money and financial freedom and everything in between.
I love it. Love it. Now, Jackson, when we first met, I remember you were actually in a suit and tie. I'd seen you in your videos. You're dressed in all kinds of casual attire, but you were in a suit and tie. We were in Australia at a mastermind, and I thought this guy's a really smart looking guy. And I think you were at that time looking for ways to get on TEDx as a speaker. Do you remember that?
I do, yes.
Yeah,
we were sitting around having a great dinner with a bunch of very smart people. And we were talking about the story that Taki spoke about. What is your Ferrari? I don't want to butcher the story, but the whole kind of idea was if you're on your deathbed and your life has run out, what is the equivalent of having a Ferrari? And for me, it was talking on a TED stage. So we're kind of brainstorming ideas and things to do. Haven't quite got there yet, but it's definitely still on the bucket list to tick off.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine that if you got on that stage, or should I say, when you get on the stage, you're going to change a lot of people's perception about what's possible with running a business and the lifestyle attached to that. Now, for the listeners, I'd love it if you could just spend about 1 minute. Give us a brief snapshot of what is your business, what kind of people do you serve, and how do you help them?
For sure, mate. So I'm Jackson Millan. I'm also known as the Wealth Mentor. We are wealth coaches and strategic advisors for 6 and 7-figure service businesses. So our typical clients are coaches, consultants, advisors, agency owners, health and wellness, and trade businesses. And they typically have a good business. They're very good at what they do, but they're a financial hot mess. And they want to understand the language of money so they can better use their business as a vehicle for wealth creation. Many of those individuals feel like they're falling behind, like they might own their home, they might have a little bit of wealth, but they haven't necessarily made it a priority. And they typically come to a crossroads where they realize that they need to put their focus there, and they don't want to abdicate responsibility to your typical professional advisors. They want to be taught and coached to how to make better decisions for themselves. And we essentially help them improve their profit, maximize their cash flow, and systematically turn their business profit into wealth. And we've successfully helped our clients accumulate over $2 billion in combined wealth, which is pretty awesome.
That's pretty damn cool. And I'm guessing that in this community, there's a lot of transparency around people talking about their numbers, around like how much they're making, what's their profits, how much they're taking home and stuff. Is that right?
It's surprising, Ken. There's a lot of taboos around talking about money. We refer to this as people finding themselves in one of two camps. They either don't want to be in what we call in Australia a tall poppy, which basically means like you're braggadocious and you kind of have an ego and you kind of like talking about stuff that you shouldn't necessarily talk about as if you want to be the center of attention. Or on the flip side, you don't want to be perceived as being a lame duck, where you're struggling to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, and you are embarrassed by potentially your financial shortcomings or your mistakes that you've made. And in either camp, there is a lot of issues around that. There's a lot of emotional and mental anchors that hold you back, because I think all of that is deep-seated in levels of embarrassment, lack of worthiness, and therefore, because we don't talk about it, it actually keeps us in this invisible ceiling of growth that really allows us to get where we want to go. So I'm very open and transparent about my own financial position. I even share, like, down to the last dollar, exactly how much I make, what I spend, my mistakes, my wins, what I do in my business, in my personal wealth. And the reason for that, Ken, is because I want to promote this new age of us being able to openly and honestly discuss these taboo topics, so we can actually move past these self-limiting beliefs and focus on rising tides lifting all ships. So that's my mission in life, and I'm chipping away at it one day at a time.
Yeah. You know what you described there about the tall poppy syndrome, I think it's even stronger here in Japan, where, I sound American, but I am Japanese, born and raised here. And the culture here is that there's an old Japanese proverb: if a nail sticks out, hammer it down. Kind of like, kind of like a tall poppy. Tall poppy pops up and you chop it back down to size, right? It's the same idea. And talking about your financial situation, whether you're above or below the average of your friends, a lot of people kind of might perceive that as rude or, TMI, too much information, in order to preserve in Japan, it's called wa, which means circle, the circle of your friendships. And I think there's some value to that. But when you're a business owner, if you let the social norms dictate how much money you can make or not make, that's a pretty dangerous game to play, isn't it?
I agree, yeah. It's interesting to even try and discover where these norms came from of not talking about this stuff. And look, I agree, there are certain individuals out there who talk about these things from an improper position. But I believe that if you are a tall poppy, if you have achieved success, it's your duty to pass on that knowledge and pass on and impart that experience to others that make their journey easier. It's what mentorship is, right? It's what a lot of us do in our business. We impart our knowledge in order to help people elevate their position and learn from our mistakes and the lessons we've learned along the way. And on the flip side, if you're in a poor position, if you kid yourself saying that everything's fine and nothing's wrong and you're like this duckling, like you look gracious on the surface, but below the water, you're kind of frantically kicking your legs to try and stop getting swept away by the current, and you're not asking for help. Not only are you making it more difficult for yourself to get out of that situation, but you're reinforcing these social norms of not asking for help, which perpetuates the issue. So as long as you've got the right intentions, and you can pre-frame that in a particular way, then I think it's our duty to talk more openly and honestly about this. And I talk very, very openly that in my mid-20s, I almost went broke, Ken. I was on the verge of bankruptcy. I had a business that was a cash-eating monster. My father was diagnosed with late-stage stomach cancer. He couldn't work. I inherited the responsibility of paying the mortgage and putting food on the table for 4 people, including myself. I went through my first corporate restructure and had a massive pay cut. It was basically like when it rains, it pours moment. And my business, what I realized is it wasn't something I was actually passionate about. It was a men's fashion e-commerce brand. And I had built that business out of pure ego to prove all of the naysayers wrong of what I could do. Like a kind of a stick it to the man kind of thing, right? And when I really broke it down, I was only doing it to achieve that objective. I wasn't passionate about the business. It didn't fulfill me with purpose. It had no connection to who I was as a person. So I decided to wrap up that business. I actually donated all of my remaining stock to charity. I wiped the slate clean, and then I doubled down on my advisory and my coaching, and then I earned my way out of this multi-six-figure deficit that I was in. And I've now been able to accumulate a $3 million net worth. My business is currently worth about $7 million. We do about $400,000 a month in turnover. We actively acquire businesses. We actively acquire property. We actively invest in the share market. I've taken myself from the abyss with no silver spoons through the school of hard knocks, and I've been able to create a lifestyle business that not only has allowed me to create financial freedom, but it's allowed me to create lifestyle freedom. And we now live on a 70-acre property that we've turned into an animal sanctuary. And I film crazy content every day of chasing snakes and rescuing animals and basically showing people how to live for today and plan for tomorrow. So I really try and embody my ethos and practice what I preach.
I love it. Love it. Now, I love how you went back to your roots and the mistakes you made. Could you tell me, number one, what level of education do you have? And after school, how did you, what happened before you got into that first business, the men's fashion brand?
I've always been one of those kids that the teachers always said, he's very bright, but if only he applied himself. And as an adult, I've actually been diagnosed with ADHD, and all of the warning signs were there. But I just think in the 90s, there was a lot of stigma around ADD and ADHD, and I don't think my parents wanted me to have that label. So they never pursued getting me help and kind of getting me medicated, which I think was a blessing. However, I didn't get good grades. I just kind of always did the bare minimum to get by, because my thought process was always, well, why should I try when I can do the absolute bare minimum and pass? There's no incentive for me to get like straight A's. So I'm just going to get through. So I didn't get very good grades, and I didn't have an opportunity to go to university. But I also had an epiphany when I finished high school. Is I said, well, my colleagues and my friends are going to go to university and do like a 4 or 5 year degree, potentially an 8-year degree if they do their masters. I'm going to go and get into the workforce, get real world experience, and I'm going to be miles ahead of them. So at 19, when I left school, I basically door knocked until a financial advisor would give me a traineeship, and I wouldn't take no for an answer. So at baby-faced 19, without the beard, I looked about 12. I got a traineeship as a financial advisor. I started training and studying at night in order to get accredited. And basically my theory on hypotheses on the workforce was true. But by the time my friends had finished school, I was their boss, right? They had no life experience. All they had is book smarts, no street smarts. And I was miles ahead of them. But I was in a corporate environment that I hated. I worked for a big bank, a big four bank. And it was just...
Wait, so tell me about the process there. Like, and that you said, you beg for someone to give you an apprenticeship. Now, if there's a 19-year-old listening to this right now, they might be just like, what do you do? Do you go through the phone book? And well, if actually you're probably old enough that the internet was invented around that time, but how did you go about finding that apprenticeship?
Yeah, it's a good point. I had a really great story. And I basically, when I spoke to the recruiter, I said, look, I know you probably don't want to hire me and you're going to kind of count me off straight away, but let me tell you why I'm doing this and why this is so important. I come from a blue-collar background. My parents were business owners. They're incredibly hard workers, but they were terrible with money. And they didn't know what they didn't know. And as a result, they worked for money for their entire lives as opposed to money working for them, and they basically have nothing. Now, I want to be the catalyst for change in my family. And my vision for creating that is that if I can become a financial advisor and surround myself with money and the smartest minds around money, then I can actually change the course of every future generation of my family. So will you give me that shot?
Dude, that's so good. That's amazing.
Well, actually, it wasn't. No, I didn't get the first one, to be honest. I think it was the third or fourth. But I got a yes. I did get a yes. And I really felt that it was a bad decision to get started with Kemp, because here's the thing about the advice industry, the world around. The advice industry traditionally wants to serve two kinds of people. They want to help wealthy people get wealthier through private wealth management, or they want to sell commission-based financial products to people like my parents who quite frankly don't need them. And the financial advice industry has done very little to help the battlers escape their societal class. And it crushed me, because what I thought the industry was about was completely different, and I almost hung up my hat. But very early on, I made a decision that I wasn't actually going to call myself a financial advisor anymore. I was going to start calling myself a wealth coach. And within the parameters of the advice world, I would actually creating an educational syllabus to help elevate people like my parents, to teach them the fundamentals and get them to a better position with the right tools and frameworks to support them, to learn the language of money, to learn how to plan, to learn how to control cash flow, all of the basic 101 stuff that we should be taught at school that we're not taught. It didn't go down very well, because I was very much, a kind of a tall poppy in the advice industry. And I was disheartened because I was always held back. I never had an easy ride because I stood out. And in the banks, they don't want you to stand out. They want you to conform. And that was really the frustration that led me to start my first business. And that business was started out of necessity when my father was diagnosed with cancer. And I went through that restructure. It was my brilliant idea to bridge the gap of household income in order to keep everything afloat. And we got through, but through the accumulation of substantial amounts of bad debt. And once again, I'm a big believer that business is so hard. Unless you are passionate about what you do and who you serve and how you serve them, you are likely going to burn out and you will not be able to persevere long term. And that was the epitome of that business.
Tell me a bit about the bad debt. Was this a result of like just getting the business started, or inventory, or expansion, initiatives?
It was a combination of really three things, Ken. First one was the cash flow deficit in the household. My dad was quite a high income earner, but he didn't prepare. He was very much hand to mouth. And the type of work that he did in the trade space was shutdown based. He would work in the oil and gas industry, and they would shut down a refinery for, say, a month or two, and they'd implement new machineries or updates or whatever. So his income was very volatile. He didn't put much money away. He didn't listen to me to get personal protection. I wrote about this extensively in my first book, that when he got cancer and I discovered how poor his insurance policies were, he didn't actually even get anything paid out. It was quite ridiculous. So I carried that burden. There was obviously the burden of the inventory. A lot of e-commerce businesses, particularly when we're talking about fashion, are very balance sheet heavy and working capital heavy. So I was perpetuating, making sure that I could have enough stock to try and scale this business. And the third part was really trying to aggressively scale the marketing to clear the stock, which was very expensive. And it didn't work. And it was an uphill battle, and basically it was pretty close to $500,000 of bad debt that I ended up accumulating over that course of time, the combination of those three things, and was very close to considering bankruptcy and hitting that big red reset button and waiting 7 years to start again. And thank God I didn't. I earned my way out of it. I paid it all off, and I was able to come out the other side.
So 7 years, you just mentioned, is that an Australian policy? If you declare bankruptcy, you can't run a business for 7 years? Is that what you're referring to?
It's not the business. You can still run a business, but the issues are around getting access to credit. So whether it be credit cards or personal loans or business loans or home loans, basically the slate is pretty much wiped clean, and you essentially are in limbo for about 7 years until your credit file resets, and therefore you can then start building a credit file again.
That's interesting. In Japan, I'm going to assume there's something similar, but they keep all of that, those wait times and the amounts and all that, locked away. Like you don't have direct access to it. You can't see it, but the bankers can see it. So there's a lot of stigma around that. And I wish they'd open it up to make that information a lot more transparent. I think they just don't want to be.
Yeah, people should know their options, right?
They should, absolutely. In the US, it's the credit score is something that you could just go to a public website and find right away. It's like a public number practically. So that's pretty interesting. Do they do that in Australia?
Same in Australia. They do, yeah. So we can access that whenever we like. I think my credit score at the moment is 950, so it's probably as high. I think it goes as high as 1,000. So, definitely been able to work my way out of that situation and put myself in a good position.
So you went through that business, and what was the transition like going from that to what you're doing now? Was there something in between, or did you go directly into that?
I was still doing it. So I was basically working a day job in corporate, selling my soul to the man, and then doing the fashion business as a side hustle. And I did that because I was kind of disheartened. I personally thought that in the environment that I was in, that wasn't going to be my long-term game. I was looking for grass that was greener on the other side. And after the kind of failure of the fashion business, I really unpacked it. I said, well, I love what I do. I just don't love the environment that I'm in. And to be fair, there was probably self-limiting beliefs about taking the leap of faith, like many people who are in the kind of golden handcuffs of corporate and they are considering leaping out into their own business. It's difficult, right? Particularly when you've got a lot of responsibilities and you've got a lot of burdens that you carry. There's a big risk. But what I come to realize is that even employment is a risk. We have this false sense of security around employment. And when I escaped that and I went all in on my wealth coaching and my consulting, I realized that I would never go back to being an employee ever again. And I should have done it earlier. And when I went all in, just like the skies opened, everything aligned. And finally, I felt like I was doing something on purpose. And I go, this is what I was born to do. And when I committed myself 100% to it, the results just started to flow. And I very quickly had my first 7-figure year. I cleared all of my debt in that time. And basically, it's been kind of onwards and upwards ever since. Not to say that it's been easy. There's been challenges every single step of the way. However, when you have a deep connection to purpose and significance of why you are doing something, that becomes bigger than you. And the challenges and the obstacles that you have to navigate along the way are immaterial. They're just a natural consequence of pursuing what it is that you're passionate about. So it kind of becomes like a big game.
Yeah. And now you very casually glided over the statement saying, I very quickly had my first 7-figure year. Now, for a lot of entrepreneurs, there's an emotional attachment to that, the 2 commas, the 7 figures, the $1 million, right? Could you stretch out that phrase to maybe, just a little bit more context? How long did that take you? And what do you think were the key drivers getting you there?
Yes. So I did my first 7-figure year in my second full year of my business. So I think my first year I did about 750,000, and then the second year was over 1 million.
And this is just a one-man show at this point, or were you already bringing on a team?
I built a team along that way. So I built a support team, and I'd had other advisors in the business. So I'd already started to create leverage, and yeah, it was great. Here's the thing: the reason why I glaze over it, Ken, is that I'm not money motivated, which might be a surprise as someone who is referred to as the wealth mentor. And the thing that I realized is that for me, I'm not motivated by money because I see money as a means to an end. Money is an enabler for me to create the lifestyle that I want and for me to create the impact and the legacy that I want in the world. I couldn't give 2 shits about money itself. It means really nothing to me. And therefore, once I started positioning it as a vehicle and defining the amount of that resource that I needed to achieve my goals, everything became so much easier. So quite frankly, I don't care about the 7-figure year. I don't even care about now as we approach 8 figures. It is what it is. I've always been the believer that if you do the right thing and you align with your values and you add value to people and add more value to society than you demand in return, then money is a natural consequence of that. So it was quite easy, to be fair.
That's interesting because in order to do financial advice, right? In order to be a wealth mentor, then you're literally, there's got to be a part of your brain that's thinking in numbers. Like, what's the return? What's the risk? What's the investment? What's the exposure? There's a zillion formulas running through your brain. And that's literally what is going to give you the results that give you the lifestyle. So how much of your time are you thinking in like big picture things like, what do I want in life? How many people do I want to impact? And then thinking in processes, the actual numbers and the money that makes it possible. Like, are they concurrently running in your brain, or do you kind of split your time between those?
It's a great question, mate. Here's my genius. With my ADHD, I have a knack for making complex financial topics very, very simple. And I've made a career of that. My whole philosophy on this is that it's easy to make finance hard. It's extremely difficult to make it easy that a layperson can understand. Because like statistics show, even if we look at business, like 4 out of 5 businesses fail in 5 years, 98% of them fail in 10. The latest statistics that I saw is less than 5% of individuals are going to have the financial means to allow them to live a comfortable lifestyle in retirement without reliance on family or government. So that means that the system does not serve 95% of people, right? And something is wrong, right? And when we break this down, there are 3 factors to consider. There's the strategies. We all have access to the strategy. Sure, there's a knowledge part to that, but there's the strategies, right? There's the tactics. It's about how do we implement that particular strategy based on the nuances of your situation. Once again, once you understand how to do it, then that's relatively straightforward. So that means that the only variable that exists here is the operating system. It is how you as an individual chooses to apply those strategies and tactics in the context of your situation. And this is something that isn't referred to or talked about much. And this really came to a head for me, Ken, when I had this particular client, high income earners, household income of over $500,000, had a young family. They came to me in huge amounts of consumer debt. And I spent like weeks designing this holistic wealth plan that considered all of their goals and aspirations. And basically I looked for every single loophole and opportunity in order to put them in the best possible position. And when I put together this advice document, it was like 150 pages. It was basically like all of the wheels of the cogs in the machine were all documented down to the nth degree. And I was so proud of it. And I remember presenting it to them and then realizing midway as their eyes kind of glazed over and as they kind of continued to smile and nod, and I'm like, ooh, something's wrong here. And then we started implementing and supporting them through it. And by month 1 or 2 of the implementation of the plan, they had failed already. They weren't following the steps. And I'd made it crystal clear of exactly what they needed to do to almost presuppose their ability to achieve their goals, and they still wouldn't do it. And it was that moment that I realized that there was something going on here that wasn't being addressed in the context of traditional advice. And that's where we started expanding our value proposition to also work on money mindset. We need to lift those invisible ceilings to create capacity for expansion. And not until we lift those invisible ceilings, you will not do what is necessary and required in order for you to achieve your goals. And we see this both in business, and we see this both in wealth. And it's critically important, and it's so overlooked.
What specifically are you seeing as like the most common, what you call invisible ceiling, like these limiting beliefs that people have? And I know you've worked with probably several hundred, maybe even thousands of clients. There's got to be some, like, what's the number one and the number two limiting beliefs that you're seeing?
Great question. The first one we see is that most of the people that we work with, particularly business owners, are ambitious, right? And ambition requires a certain amount of foresight, right? We need to look out into the future, out over the horizon, in order to define what it is that we want and then set out in pursuit of it. The double-edged sword of that is that many ambitious individuals hate marinating in the pain of what has happened. They want to move on. And for this issue, they don't pay homage to the past. And it was famously said by Winston Churchill, those who fail to learn from history are bound to repeat it. And we see these vicious cycles of financial habits, behaviors, and outcomes rearing their ugly head over and over again. So what we actually do is we take our clients through what we call a money memories activity. We go through their entire life and we actually define all of the key defining moments of their life that have imprinted upon them their current habits and behaviors around money. We understand the good, we understand the bad, and then what we do is we try and reinforce systems that when we understand those situations, we can leverage the good and we can buffer against the bad. Critically important. And what's really interesting, Ken, is the amount of grown men, dominant personalities that we've made cry go through this exercise. It's really, really powerful.
I think I might cry going through the exercise. There's you've probably heard of someone named Keith Cunningham. Does that name ring a bell for you?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've been to multiple of his workshops, and I even hired him to come teach my audience here in Japan. But one of the first things he says is, "Hey guys, put up your hands if you've ever paid the dumb tax." And he doesn't give any context to what that is or explain it, but everybody and their gut knows exactly what that means, the dumb tax. And then the second question he follows up with is, where would your net worth be now, like in percentages, if you had not ever paid the dumb tax? And everybody, just from their gut knows it's going to be, anywhere from 3 to 10x where they're at. And I think you nailed it right there. It's, Keith calls it the dumb tax. You call it, memory mindset? Is that what you said? No,
yes, our money mindset and our money memories.
Money memories. That's it. Money memories. That would avoid so much dumb tax, wouldn't it?
For sure, right? And it's just taking that time to marinate in the pain, have this feedback loop, and then use this as a way to craft and optimize our trajectory moving forwards. The second one, Ken, is understanding behavioral finance principles, one of which is the most important that we deal with, is loss aversion bias. Many of us are great at getting ourselves out of the shit from a position of battle to a position of comfort. But I was taught by one of my first mindset coaches, the situations we learn to survive, our survival ultimately depends upon. We create these synapses pathways that we say, well, I've got out of this situation before. Sometimes we subconsciously put ourselves back in that situation because we know how to get out of it. And what we need to do is we need to acknowledge that as human beings, we feel the emotion of a loss twice as significantly as an emotion of a gain. So once we get out of battle and get to a position of comfort, we will resource guard that comfort to a huge degree that often stops us from going to a position of growth. And it's only in that position of growth where we actually work towards creating financial freedom. So when we simplify this, if we feel that emotion twice as much of a loss as we do for a gain, we need to put at least twice as much effort into the future planning and creating significance and purpose around why we want to elevate to a position of growth in order to overcome that action threshold. Otherwise, your default action is inaction. Stay where you are. So we spend a lot of time on that. The third part is reinforcing the idea that wealth is not about perfection. It's about actual improvement. It's progress over perfection, because no one has a crystal ball. Like, I might look a bit like a wizard, but I have absolutely no idea what the future holds in terms of the economy and finances and the share market or property or whatever. But what we're able to know is that what's history taught us, and then what can we do in terms of making the best possible decisions that maximize peace of mind and certainty, and then optimize and improve over time. And this just allows us to have a more scientific, objective approach, less emotional, less knee-jerk, which becomes far more enjoyable for your average typical entrepreneur who's not a finance person. It's pretty simple.
I love that. And for the listeners, I want to say something. Me coming from experiencing everything you just described there at some level, whether in the past or currently, I'll tell you that right there, even though we're not talking about content creation, if you take one thing away, this will be worth every single moment of listening. I'm going to go back, listen to this, transcribe it, which my team does anyway, because we re-edit all this stuff. But that was powerful, and I wasn't expecting a money mindset masterclass. But I think that those things you said have triggered my mind to think in a certain way and start actually looking for gaps in my own behavior that will help me to stop paying so much goddamn dumb tax. Thank you for that.
Well, mate, it's great how it comes full circle, Ken, because this is a very similar lesson that I learned from you. When I first interacted with you, one of the first videos I saw was your first video is just the next step to your 100th. And that really resonated with me and set me down the journey of creating this content congruently that aligns with my character and having this very much no fucks given approach to how I do things. And you played a big part in that, mate. So I think there's common threads between both of our worlds of what we do, and there's very similar themes that come behind it.
I appreciate that. And thanks for reminding me. I should go actually reshoot that video and put out an updated version of that. That is powerful. A lot of people think about the result, and they just don't see that. They just got to take one step right now to start moving in that direction. Give me a snapshot right now in your business. You recently, a year or two ago, you bought a farm. You could probably retire at any minute right now if you wanted to. And I think you are kind of living a semi-retired life, yet your business is pumping. How are you generating leads and sales? And I know that money is not important to you, but I want to talk about that a bit. How are you able to sustain the lifestyle, buy a farm, have your team making money for you while you chase chickens and snakes?
Yes. So a bit of backstory. A couple of years ago, just as COVID started, we had a vision to spend a year traveling around Australia in a four-wheel drive. Because we work with a lot of service-based business owners who are key people, they always make excuses for sacrificing and compromising their lifestyle in pursuit of growing and scaling their business. And I called bullshit on it. And I'm going to show you. Like, I've got a multi-seven-figure business. I'm going to show you how I set my business up to allow me the opportunity to go and create financial freedom now. Not just the finance, but also the lifestyle freedom to go and do things that many people wait their entire lifetime to do. And why this is so important to me, Ken, is my dad died. His stomach cancer evolved into pancreatic cancer, and he died at 66. And he'd worked an entire lifetime trying to squirrel away every last red cent to retire and live this amazing lifestyle, which he never got to live. So I hate retirement. I hate the concept of retirement, and I never want to retire. I want to create financial freedom now. And my motto is live for today, plan for tomorrow. So I successfully did that. I set the business up to allow me the opportunity. We fitted out a four-wheel drive. We went to the remotest parts of Australia with myself, my partner, and our two dogs, which turned into three dogs. Story for another time. And we also had an objective to look for our dream home. We always wanted to have a farm where we could create an animal sanctuary. We're super passionate about animals and animal rescue. And we come up to far north Queensland into the tropics, and we fell in love with this beautiful property that's 70 acres. It's surrounded by about 5,000 acres of World Heritage rainforest. We've basically set up our animal sanctuary. We've got about 80 animals now, and we're loving it. And the reason why I do this is because somebody needs to show people how to walk the walk, right? There is a lot of gurus out there who talk the talk and they talk a massive game, but they don't actually follow the steps that they talk about. So it's really important to me to say something and declare something and then prove it is possible. I enjoy it as well. So it's been fantastic. It's challenging. Look, to be fair, I'm busy. I have 7 businesses now. We're in the process of acquiring 3 more. I've got a team of 31. We've got about 1,200 clients around the world. However, I've been able to create a business that affords me the opportunity to do the things I want to do when I want to do them. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
I love it. Now, you talked about your lifestyle part. You're making content around that often, which I think, I think it's a great way to just kind of rub it in the face of all the naysayers saying that, hey, like I can't do that because, fill in the blank, right? Tell us a bit about what's your process around attracting new clients to your business. Are you running ads? Is it 100% organic? Could you walk us through that? What I want to do here is prove to my viewers that creating content makes sense, whether it's paid, whether it's organic, whether it's internal, right? Just to people who've already opted into your systems, but to be able to link all those steps together from when people first hear about you, hear your name or understand what you do, to actually pulling out their credit card and investing to work with you.
Yeah, so we do 100% organic. We've realized that our typical clients are smart, they're affluent people, and they're probably a little bit suspicious of the financial services industry. Maybe they've been burnt before. So they are observers, and they typically observe for a very long time. Because we're in an interesting space, Ken, is that people don't see wealth as a today problem. Very few people do. They're like, as a business owner, I've got to generate more leads and I've got to get more sales and I've got to do all of these other things. And wealth is like typically the last thing on their list of things to do. Like, yeah, it's a nice idea, but I'll get around to that later. So we're in a really interesting conundrum to try and convince people that the sooner they start, the better the results. So a lot of our leads actually come through strategic partnerships. We work with other non-competing experts who have audiences of business owners. We typically come and do masterclasses, provide really high-value content, easy to implement frameworks. We basically give them all of the tools on a silver platter. And some of those people self-implement and get amazing results. And some just say, hey, this is a great idea. I need more support. And they reach out and they connect with us, whether that be making inquiry to become a client or following us and watching our content. The content is the common thread that keeps us top of mind and relevant for when these individuals are ready to make a decision. The epiphany moment I had, Ken, is that for a very long time, I just kept talking about wealth and finance, and I was just kind of beating that same drum. And let's face it, I'm passionate about it because I can see the value of getting this right. Most people don't give a fuck about finances and money and investing. They would prefer to do anything else. So I realized that, yes, I need to weave that in, but it's probably 20 or 30% of what I talk about, and 70% of it is shock, awe, and entertainment. It is wrangling 3-meter or 4-meter pythons on my property and trying not to get bitten. It's rescuing day-old calves from dairies who are going to get hit over the head with a hammer. It's getting chased by 6-foot-tall, murderous velociraptor birds called cassowaries that live on our property. It's all of this crazy stuff that people they're so shocked, and it's such a big pattern interrupt that they can kind of live vicariously through me, who's just a typical down-to-earth guy who's just living his best life. So it tends to work well.
Amazing. So I've seen, like, on my feed every time you post something about chasing a snake or rescuing a cow, or the cow's breaking out, or it is so fun to watch. But I'm not seeing the wealth education stuff. Do you separate your channels on that?
No, it's all on the same channel. I probably suspect that we get throttled on that kind of stuff by the algorithm. And one of the reasons why we don't run ads is we were actually banned on all platforms. And it was actually a godsend, right? We were spending so much money on ads. And the issue that we had, obviously, we were in a high-risk advertising category, right? Because there's a lot of spruikers and snake oil salesmen out there, right? And we would always struggle between the positioning, between being super vague and like not having cut through in our messaging, or being breaching advertising policy and getting flagged as MLM, right? And then ultimately we ended up getting banned. So I suspect that a lot of the social media platforms throttle finance and wealth related content because of the potential risks it presents to consumers. So that's probably why you don't see it.
Yeah, no, that's all good. But then that also means that the people who do find it are actively seeking it out, and they've heard of you and they know what you're doing, and then they get reminded by seeing the snake catching videos, and it's like, oh yeah, Jackson Millan, what did he put out recently about wealth? They'll click your profile and look at your recent video or something. Okay, love that, love that. That's amazing. I think that for the listeners, that's going to be really important to look at not being one dimensional when it comes to content. One dimensional, like when you started out, it was beating the same horse, right? Now you bring on other things. I think a video you made went semi-viral because of some controversy about driving through a flooded road. That was a year or so ago, right?
Yes.
You remember that?
That was massive. Yes. So to give some context, guys, our property has a single road in, and it crosses a river. It's tidal. And because we're in the tropics, we get about 3 meters of rain a year. So it floods quite frequently. Probably 3 or 4 times a year we're blocked off. Now, it looks much worse than what it is. It was the water was probably only about less than half a meter over the bridge, and we've got a very capable 4-wheel drive. And we do it all the time. It just happens in the tropics, but people just freaked out because they're like, you shouldn't do that, yada, yada, yada. So it went kind of viral. I think we got like 200,000 views on that, which was pretty crazy.
Yeah, you're kitted out with the snorkel. You've got, the off-road tires. I think some people they just feel they got to comment on everything. It's, if they don't.
Everyone's got an opinion online, mate.
Everybody's got an opinion, yeah. And I think if anything, it just helped to boost your visibility a lot more doing that. And they were just helping you without knowing it. Okay, let's look at how do you see things moving in the future? Now, when it comes to business, obviously there is some financial fluidity. I mean, there's FTX is going SVB. There's all kinds of stuff going on. Crypto market is extremely volatile. And so that's on the actual investment and wealth side. And then in the content creation side, you've got AI, which has been around for a long time, but it exploded in November last year because they made a very easy to use and free version of it. And now it is what everybody is talking about in content creation. Have you thought about these and made any strategies or even just rough plans for the future and how you might utilize these things?
Yeah, I'm going to break this into 3 categories, Ken, so I can make sure I address it all. So the first part is business, right? Now, since the global financial crisis, we have had it easy, okay? We've had low inflation, we've had free-flowing capital, we've had high consumer sentiment. It has never been easier to grow and scale a business. And there are a lot of zombie businesses that in any other economic times or conditions would not have a viable business. And now that the stakes are rising for the first time really in many people's working lives, people need to adapt and understand that they need to know the financial viability of how they run their business and be able to adapt that to the times. Because there's going to be many businesses that are no longer going to be around to tell the tale if they do not learn these skills and apply them appropriately. This is where we focus a lot with our clients, that we help them create a dynamic financial model in their business that allows them to secure their profits and scale their profits so they don't get that eroded by the scale tax and things like inflation and rising interest rates and cost of doing business. So that's the first thing. The second part is wealth. Wealth is really simple when you boil it down. There are 3 tried and true ways to build wealth in this world. And if you look at any rich list in the world, the vast majority of those individuals, I'd probably say 99% of them, have built wealth using these 3 things. 1, their business. They have built an actual valuable, saleable business, and they have acquired other businesses, rolled them in, and then allowed them to grow their group. 2, they acquire good quality property based on tried and true fundamentals. They don't buy crappy property in speculative areas based on tactical strategies. They buy good quality blue chip property that is going to be desirable for the foreseeable future. Based on net migration. There needs to be more people moving there than moving away. There needs to be diversified employment, so we're not reliant on any single sector. There needs to be infrastructure spending to make the place more livable and enjoyable. There needs to be a fixed amount of future supply, so there's not the ability for people to build huge sky rises or to expand houses as far as the eye can see. And there needs to be affordability. not for you, for people in that local market, that they can actually afford for property prices to continue to go up. These are the basic fundamentals of property that apply globally, no matter where you are. And then the third part is the share market. And this is not necessarily about stock picking. Like, unless you want to be a professional investor, you should not stock pick. You should invest based on asset classes and markets that allow you to participate in those markets and get the average of how they perform. So I'm a big believer in index funds and ETFs, which basically allow us to buy all of the investments that exist in a stock market and get the average of all of them. And we've been able to prove that 80% of returns are produced by asset allocation, and the remainder is timing and asset selection. So I would prefer to put my money into something that I can systemize and not have to worry about stock picking and allow me to get the majority of the upside. Those are the only three things. Now, everything else is either a fad or is untested. It's speculative. So I've seen, sure, there's been people who have made money in crypto, but that has not been based on any fundamental intrinsic drivers. It has been pure speculation, and it's equivalent to gambling. If you want to have an allowance in your investment strategy for gambling, sure, but make sure it's money that you can actually afford to lose. And then the third part, Ken, is the content, the AI. I see AI as a symbiotic, huge opportunity for us to create immense leverage, to get out of the commoditization of the manual labor and to elevate people into strategic positions of real needle-moving activity. Because we are all burdened by low-value tasks. Like the old 80-20 rule, right? This solves the 80% to allow you to put that into the 20% that already produces 80% of the results. So I see it as a way of magnifying results for those who use it appropriately and don't get caught up in once again, the fad. Stick to the tried and true fundamentals and the real practical applications that create real outcomes in your life and in your business. That's a lot of words.
No, this is really good. You did such a good job of condensing that and categorizing in a short period of time. And now I understand what you said earlier about how you could take a complicated thing and make it easy to understand. And that's what people pay for. That's beautifully said. And I think I agree with you 100% on all those. I am not an experienced investor. My wife is the one who does the stock picking, and that is her pretty much her main job right now, if you call it a job, right? And she's good at that. She loves the numbers, runs the formulas and all that. But everything else, totally makes sense. Now, I've got to wrap this up in a second, but I've got two questions, and you could answer them in either order. Number one, my audience is going to be mostly business owners who are looking to leverage content. So how would they get in touch with you, and if they wanted to learn from you? And the second one is, when's the last time you wore a proper suit?
So I'll answer the first one. So the easiest way, we've covered a lot of content here, right? You've probably got some great ideas. A good idea in theory remains exactly that, just a good idea until you put it into place. Now, we need to understand the order in which those ideas need to be put into place. So we've actually developed a 40-point financial performance scorecard. We've done this with thousands of business owners the world around. The average score is about 18 out of 40, meaning that most business owners are below average financially. Now, I don't care what your score is, guys. I don't care if it's 5 or it's 35. What it will do is quantify where you are and help you identify the right low-hanging fruit for you to pursue. So you don't chase shiny objects that aren't going to add value, right? So if you go to wealthhealthcheck.com.au, that's wealthhealthcheck.com.au. Not only will you get the scorecard, but you get access to my best-selling books, a whole heap of other calculators and tools that will really help you implement what we've spoken about today. And of course, if you want to get in touch and have a chat how we can help you in a high capacity, all the details will be on there as well. As for a suit, I've sworn...
I'll be putting all the links to the if you're listening to the podcast, guys, the audio only, go to the show notes. All those links will be there for social media and everything he just described there. And Jackson, I'll have you send those to me right afterwards. If you're on YouTube, that's in the YouTube description. Now, I'll let you answer the second question.
And yeah, I've sworn against suits. Suits don't necessarily suit the farm life. So currently I'm wearing some kind of short work shorts. I wear Crocs pretty much exclusively now because they're very practical footwear on a farm. And I've just got a shirt that I picked up at a thrift store not that long ago. So I'm a very modest kind of fella. I do have suits in the cupboard, so I probably only wear that kind of attire when my girlfriend Anna and I go and dance Argentine tango. Because you can't wear Crocs and dance tango, can you, Ken?
I haven't tried. I wouldn't know.
It's frowned upon. I can tell you that.
Mm. Okay, got it. Thank you so much, Jackson. Is there anything that you want to share to my audience that I haven't covered that you feel is important?
Look, it's never too early or too late to start, right? We can sometimes feel helpless and overwhelmed by this world because it's a completely new language. And like just as if you were trying to learn German, you can't judge your ability to speak German by the first lesson that you've attended, right? So you just need to make sure that you focus on that progress over perfection. Hopefully these resources and our conversation adds a lot of value, and make sure that you enjoy the journey.
Thank you so much. I 100% agree with that. And I think that that same advice would apply for content creation, where it's never too early or too late to start. If you haven't yet, just enjoy the journey and get started, and you'll build on those success and learn as you go. So there might be some parallels here, Jackson, like you brought
It
up
definitely
earlier.
is.
Well, guys, thank you so much for watching to the end. And the fact that you're listening right now or watching this video tells me that there was something about what Jackson shared that was immensely valuable. Otherwise, you wouldn't have given us an hour of your time, for which we are immensely grateful. So please do give this a star rating, whatever you feel it's worth. Put a comment down below. Let us know what else you'd like us to cover in the future. Jackson, thank you so much for being on the show. Immensely appreciate your presence, and I will see you again real soon.
My pleasure, mate. Chat soon.